Hey, this is Cindy from BeChamp Health, and today I'm honored to interview Delina Yule, who is also a registered holistic nutritionist. Delina, I know you were diagnosed with breast cancer several years back, and you had chosen not to take the conventional path of radiation, chemo, and surgery, and decided instead to use other methods of therapy. And that's what really intrigued me. I'm really excited to hear more about your story. I know you did some research and you even got certified as a nutritionist and you became an expert in immune health and you offer, your information and presentations. And that's how I got to hear about you is because of the Healing Strong network and on the Facebook group. And I just wanted to learn more about your story. I really wanted to dig into the details because I know whoever's listening to this will benefit from it. They'll probably, whether you have cancer or whether you just want to learn to reverse chronic illness, you're really cleaning out your terrain. You're pretty much, the fundamentals are there. So thank you again for taking the time. So let's jump in. You can start from the beginning, whenever that beginning is, or whatever that makes sense.
I guess it started with a lump that I could feel in my breast. And I mean, there was no cancer in my family. And from what I heard, how it was for, you know, with genetic, and it was if you didn't have much of a risk if it didn't run in your family. So I didn't worry too much about the lump. I thought it was, fibrocystic breast, or it kind of went a little lower sometimes, a little bigger others. So I just thought it was, hormonal. Had to do with my period. I was going through school to become a holistic nutritionist. I was nearing the end of my classes, and I still had all my case studies to do, but I went to the doctor and I was diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma. At the time, he told me I had tested positive for that. He had handed me, documentation stating that in one hand, and then the other, my plan for surgery, chemo, and radiation.
And
I,
how,
I was
how was that, how was that found out? Was it through a biopsy or was that through an
was
ultrasound?
he took a gun, the biopsy gun, and they shoot it into the breast 3 times, and it goes in, it shoots into the skin, and then another thing, a little clip goes in and grabs skin. So it basically puts 3 holes into the tumor.
Oh.
um, Essentially, about 6 weeks later is when I noticed lumps under the armpit, the left armpit. So I believe in, from what I know now, I believe that that's what spread it. But that's getting ahead of myself, because when I was diagnosed, I said to the doctor right then and there, I need some time. I'm not sure that's what I'm going to do. And he said, well, everybody does that. And I went home. I realized I don't know anything about this cancer. He didn't tell me anything. He just said invasive ductal carcinoma. And it didn't take very long in my research to learn that there was several different kinds of breast cancer. And it was pretty, pertinent information to know what type it was, for a number of different reasons. So I had phoned back, told them I wasn't going to be going to surgery, but I needed to know the type of cancer. And well, they called me for 2 weeks straight to re-educate me, because they told me I didn't realize the gravity of my situation, and I essentially had to threaten them with harassment charges to have them stop phoning every day. I did tell him I needed to know what kind of cancer. He said they do that during surgery, and I said, but I'm not having the surgery. He was adamant that that was had to happen, or I wouldn't be around. And then he wasn't very pleased with the questions that I was asking, and the fact that I said, well, you're going to have to find out what kind of cancer. I'm not going for surgery. So about 2 weeks later is when I actually found out what kind of cancer. ER/PR positive, HER2 negative. The first few weeks I had no idea what kind it was. So the staging I never found out, because he told me they don't do that until surgery. And the surgery had been planned for 3 weeks after I had been diagnosed, but I never went. So I never went back to that oncologist. I've never seen him again since. And that was almost 7 years ago. So where do I start? In the beginning, I think I mentioned the first 2 years were pretty fear driven.
Mhm.
When you hear that that diagnosis, cancer, is, you hear it over and over, and how could it be? I mean, I didn't have an awful diet, but I had had a lifestyle in the past that led me to think that between, you know, between the military and what I had done to myself afterwards, there's good chances there's some toxicity. So I started right away just grabbing onto what I seen on the internet, because I had taken some time off school. I decided I was going to do some, research and dive into really what was my best options. I
Right.
knew the lump had been there for more than 2 years, so I really wasn't in this hurry that he kept saying that if I didn't do anything right now, I was going to die. And
Mhm.
they really tried to push that fear of death into me. So I knew that I had had the lump. I had felt it for about 2 years.
So it was two
And
years before you actually got to see the
I,
doctor.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I knew
Did you
that.
have pain? Did you suffer from it? Like, did you have any
Not
of
at
the?
all. That
Okay.
Not at all. So I and it was small. It was like maybe the size of a pea, or a small grape. So I, after diagnosis, and I took the time off school, because I really didn't, at that point, I thought, well, what's the point of becoming a nutritionist? He's telling me I'm going to die. And, you really grab onto what they say. They're doctors, so they know better, right? Like,
There's
uh,
also, yeah, that nocebo effect, right? That we all know that what that can do.
right. So then, I started really watching things like, Crispy Cancer, The Truth About Cancer, Ty Boilinger's book. So I really started looking into other alternatives, and I went to hyperbaric oxygen and high dose vitamin C right away in
Okay.
Toronto. And I started doing a ketogenic diet, because that's what they say was recommended for when you're doing high dose vitamin C plus the hyperbaric. It was good too. And I had read a book by Dr. Winters, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, and she discusses this as well. So I was convinced the ketogenic diet was for me, and I got on it. My liver enzymes with my very first blood work went through the roof, and they had been pretty stable. So I knew something was not right with the diet that I was on. So right away, I thought, well, how come it's not working for me? More research led me to think that, maybe learning my terrain is probably the best, instead of running out and jumping onto $6,000 for one thing and 4,000 for another. I could see it getting very expensive very quickly. So I really needed to really fine tune an individual plan that might work for me. I realized that there's certain genes that don't, make it harder for someone to digest certain fats. So once I had my DNA testing, they're called variants, SNPs. They're polymorphisms that everybody has in the DNA. And if you have one, you have slight chance. If you have one from each parent, it's more something that you should look at in the way you move forward with diet and supplementation, especially with methylation, as you know, as a nutritionist. And I do have one of those. But I do have two genes for one for the fat digestion. So for me, I started saying, okay, so ketogenic isn't right for me. That led me to think, okay, well, if that's just the SNPs, then what other? I thought, what about metals? I was in the military. I must be loaded. So I started really testing stuff like individual stuff, like my hair.
Mhm.
Found out that I had a lot of lead, which makes sense. I was an ammunition and explosives tech. I was exposed to lead on a daily basis for over 10 years. So I went to a naturopath in Toronto and did EDTA chelation.
Can you tell me more about that? What does that entail?
Okay, so I've got it up. EDTA. It's actually approved by the FDA. It's the only, I guess, naturopath treatment or protocol that's approved by the FDA for chelating metals.
Okay.
And so
Even mercury as well?
it's best for lead, but it's for lead poisoning. So
Okay.
for mercury, and not my problem was lead. Mercury, there might be something else. I would have to really look into that to see if it was the best choice for that. But for for me, for lead, it was. So, and the cost was high. I mean, I went for, I think, 28 treatments, and it was an hour and a half to 2 hours in my arm, like an IV, at Bloor and Young, at my naturopaths. And I did that for, I think, 6 weeks, and I was in there several times a week. So my numbers came down about half. It did pull out a lot of the lead, but there was a lot of the lead still left. So I worked a lot through nutrition and making sure my calcium was high, because as you know, if your calcium's not high enough, lead will compete and be more absorbed easier in the digestive system. So I started working, more with my personal numbers. Then I had a Dutch test to test my hormones and realized that my cortisol was barely there, even in the morning. So we figured out that I had a serious adrenal fatigue issue. And when I brought that up with my doctor, of course, my doctor rolled her eyes, and it wasn't even really recognized as something that one could deal with, adrenal insufficiency. But I've been able to work with that on my own with 5-HTP and a few other supplements that I have found that have really worked that connection to help out, with the stress and obviously B supplements, B vitamins and foods high in B vitamins are helpful. So I really tried to hone in my personal results, whether it was my lead or whether it was my melatonin and cortisol. So as I'm weaving through, I'm adding supplements or taking ones out, because at first I had, just soursop and you name it. I just had a bunch of supplements that everybody talks about on the internet, and for no reason, didn't know why I was taking them, had no real reason what pathway they were affecting, or if they were affecting a pathway. So then I started reading a book, Naturopathic Oncology. I think his name is Neil McKinney. He's a naturopath in Ontario. And he actually talks a lot about ratios in blood work and different natural protocols with quercetin or ALA and curcumin and different things, and tells the pathways as to what affects what. Then I kept going for testing. I did some stomach testing, realized that I was getting food sensitivity to everything. I think 90% of what they tested for, I was food sensitive. So I knew right off the bat. That was before Zonulin was actually a testable protein.
Right.
Now you can actually, right. So I had to just guess that because I had 90% food sensitivity, that I most likely had a leaky gut.
Yeah.
So I had to heal that. And L-glutamine is one of the recommendations, but for somebody with cancer, that's rocket fuel. So I had to really learn how to, maneuver around the mainstay healing protocols, because they were counterproductive with someone with cancer. So then once I started noticing that all of these things were being taken care of, I started to notice my inflammation markers go down in my blood work, which I was taking every month. After about 2 years, my interest in blood work and how my protocols and my supplements were affecting my blood work and my food became pretty much so interesting to me. I went back to CSNN, and I took the laboratory and blood work diagnostics specialty course, and then went on to do immune specialty, which included, I think, it included a breast class, which was the Dr. V's book and her 7 essentials for health. So really, it just kind of morphed into discovering what was going on in my terrain. And then as I started to see the differences, I started seeing clients differently, because then once I started seeing clients, I thought, well, geez, if I had all that, I started asking questions about, is there any industry around where you live? Are you exposed to, things that I guess aren't generally discussed, because in the toxic world that we live in, they hugely matter. They make a difference. And because my military experience was with a lot of metals and a lot of explosives, I had a special I had to have a special protocol for certain things in place. So for me, metals, I still test once every year for my hair. to make sure that that hasn't gone off in something else. And when I noticed something, like cardamom was something I noticed 2 years ago, and it was a brand of tea that I had changed.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's so interesting. And I write everything down. So for me, when I track everything that I change, so I was pretty close to what I thought it was. So when I pulled that out of my diet and changed the tea, there's certain teas out there that have a lot of metals on them. I actually now make my own tea. Like I just get unbleached tea bags and make my own because of it. So
Is the heavy metal due to like the plants themselves or the processing or the
a lot
tea
of
bag
times,
itself or
even this, all of those
the
things, but
soil?
the soil too. The soil is so contaminated these days. Um, and of course the herbs or the plants, they uptake them into their leaves, and then of course we use them as tea. So and then they're sprayed, and I mean, it's, as you know, it's not a one tier thing. There's so many tiers to it. That, and then in processing plant, they're exposed to, metals in the machinery. So different machines can cause chopping machines, all of those things can cause metal, contamination. That's a big problem with proteins,
Protein powders, you mean?
powders. It's a huge problem.
Mhm.
So I guess that's pretty much the story. It's just was really about trying to find out, where my problems laid. And it's then it all turned around to the stress, because my whole life was very traumatic. From the get-go. I grew up with an alcoholic father and a pretty violent mother. My mother ended up in a hospital, a mental hospital, when I was about 7. So we lived with relatives for a few months. She put her head through a window. So, and we had watched it. So there was a lot of trauma, that undealt with trauma. And growing up, I mean, I just thought it was normal. And I was, oh yeah, that was back when mom did this or mom did that. But I had never dealt with the abandonment issues or anything. And it's, interestingly enough, that's left breast, which is mothering issues. So I'll just put that one out there.
I'm sorry,
um,
I'd like you to repeat that actually. What was
well, the mothering issues with left breast. So
Oh, okay. Okay,
yeah,
I didn't catch
so
that.
I had a lot of interesting mothering issues with my own mother and me as a mother. Um, so very interesting stuff. I had after I left the military, I was diagnosed with PTSD, but before I was diagnosed with PTSD, I had spent some time homeless on the street. I was one of the veterans that fell through the cracks and was undiagnosed when I had released. I struggled to figure things out, and I ended up with a drug addiction. And I ended up actually having several abortions, and thinking that I was better off doing what I had done, but never dealing with the emotional, the true mothering of what had really gone on. It was the left brain that had made this decision at the time without considering the other part of it. And it wasn't until an ayahuasca retreat that I had went on about 4 years ago that I even considered that to be a piece of what I needed to recover from. So once I got clean about 15 years ago, it was just part of the past, and I had never, life moved on, and my recovery never actually considered any of that. So for me, I knew that I was missing something, because the lump wasn't disappearing, it wasn't changing, but it wasn't going away.
Mhm.
So for me, I knew that I was dealing with all of my terrain stuff. Um, I was dealing with the leaky gut, the metals, the cortisol issues with the adrenals. It was the stress, how I manage stress, and how the body keeps score. There's a really good book called, let me think how, When the Body Says No, The Hidden Cost of Stress by Gabor Mate. And
Yes,
he
I
talks,
have that book.
okay, so it is one of the ones that I recommend to all my clients, because it is one of the most profound for stress. It really makes a connection for stress and the and cancer. So how to pull back from that has been just a whole bunch of protocols to get to know how I am, what and why I am. And
It sounds
ayahuasca was a big part of that.
ayahuasca. So that was that was an experience you had 4 years ago.
Yes, I went 3 times a few years ago. She's moved, so I now she's doing them in Costa Rica. But she was here for a few years, just north of Kingston. So I was grateful to be a part of her ceremonies a few times, and I learned a lot about what I was ignoring, forgiving myself for, and what I was ignoring, even looking at. Our minds have a funny way of protecting us, so to speak. And in that protection, we ignore things that that hurt so much, that need to be dealt with, or we can't heal. So
How are you dealing with those things that were exposed during that experience? And how and can you like reflect back on how that changed your health, like with this cancer journey before and after?
well, it was almost instantaneous. I felt my whole body knew that this is I had hit I knew that this was the root cause. So for me, even the metals, I mean, it was all part of it.
Right.
But I really believe, as a nutritionist, I know it's hard to even imagine that I say food's not the most important thing. But I now believe stress and trauma it trumps, because the nervous system trumps all of that. So,
Hmm.
not necessarily, it doesn't matter what you eat. I don't think I think it's a piece. Obviously, you have to
Right.
feed your body nourishing food. But whether you eat meat or whether you eat, what you eat, I don't think it matters as much as how it affects the nervous system. How everything you do affects the nervous system,
Hmm.
and including stress. So if your body is in fight or flight all of the time, your immune system, as you know, suffers, because your body is ready to run and not ready to protect the defenses. So I really, and there's a measurable tool we can get to measure our heart rate variability, and to know whether our body is actually in fight or flight or rest and digest.
Hmm.
So, and if we're in fight or flight more than 60% of the time, then our immune system suffers. And my body was there, and I didn't know it, because like cognitively, I said I'm fine, but my body wasn't living there. My body was living in a constant state of stress without me realizing. So, I do a lot of meditation, a lot of guided meditation. Um, I actually, the guided meditations have helped a lot, even with the emotional response. I feel like over the years, you become the watcher of your emotions instead of being your emotion, which is how I used to live. If I was angry, you knew it. Um, I mean, now you'll still know it, but I don't act angry. I'll just tell you I'm angry.
Right. Right.
there's,
You're aware of how that's affecting you, so
right,
you're observing it.
right. So
Yeah.
I think, and the part of that is actually guiding the child who didn't have a mom,
Right.
uh, and parenting her now, and saying, that's, I see that you're angry, but you don't have to, acting it out that way is not helpful for anybody, and it's not as effective as you think it is.
Yeah.
uh, People don't want to listen to somebody screaming and going on. They just don't. um, Most people just want to avoid angry people when they're acting that way. Uh, so there's a lot of it's really been a journey about reconnecting with the little Delina, with the child in me that was abandoned, and not blaming anybody. My parents had so much trauma of their own going on. I'm not trying to insinuate that it was their fault, or
Yes.
it's nobody's fault. I mean, we know so much more about mental health today than we did back in the day. My mother was the first one to say, "Oh, just let the child cry himself to sleep." We know that is so bad for kids today, but back then that was something that they thought was not only okay, but it would toughen you up. And now we're seeing all the problems that were with that advice. But I know she means well, and she meant well. She certainly didn't mean to, you know. But looking back, I think they had unresolved trauma that they weren't dealing with, because they were ignoring their trauma too, because that was what you did. You just picked up and moved on.
Exactly. Yeah, well, we're always learning, right? We're always learning from one another, and today we know a bit more than what we hopefully yesterday. So, yeah, but yeah, I wanted to just go back to what you had said about leaky gut, and you were saying that for cancer, L-glutamine isn't the best. It actually is not good. Could you
So
explain what it is that you did instead then to heal the gut?
I used things like slippery elm. I
Okay.
used marshmallow root. I also actually did a lot of intermittent fasting. I still do that. Um, I found that the more breaks you give your gut, obviously, and a liquid. I had when I did thermography in 2017, just after diagnosis or just before diagnosis. That's actually how I found the lump had a heat source, was because I did a thermography, and the lump showed a heat source. So I went to the doctor and got a biopsy. So I noticed with the thermography that my teeth might have been a problem. So I had had all my teeth taken out, and I have 10 implants, and then on the implants I have zirconia plates. So, and it was the cost probably, I could have bought a tiny home for cheaper, but anyways, uh,
And
that's a
and
whole
do
other story.
did you have metal in like was it the
No, that's
mercury
why
or
I was, they wanted to put titanium posts, and I wouldn't let them. I didn't want metal in my mouth. So I asked them to do zirconia, but at the time they weren't doing zirconia plates for a whole restoration, only for one implant at a time. So I think I was like the fifth person in North America to actually have this procedure with Dr. Hagee in Toronto. They do it all the time now, he said. But so they had to put the posts in because they were just ceramic posts, and they let them fuse for 4 months before they could put the plates on. And they took 3D impressions of my old teeth and made my teeth out of the 3D impressions. It was really neat technology, but it was a procedure, because if I had titanium, I could have had them all done in one day. They put the plates on and everything in one day, but I didn't want metal. So
right?
I walked around with my hand over my face because I had posts for 4 months.
Oh,
It,
was it?
it, it,
Oh, wow. Look, I was more curious, like when you had done the thermography and you noticed all that heat source, how was your mouth? How was your dental work at that time? Did you
well,
have,
I had
when I
five.
was asking about the mercury, I was curious if you had mercury fillings prior to the,
Oh, yeah. Well, I have mercury fillings. I believe I did, because, but I had a lot of, the problem with my teeth was root canals.
okay,
So I had all of the places where they were showing, they were all root canal teeth.
okay,
So when we looked at the dentist, he said, we can save 5. My teeth were bad from my addiction on the street, my time, being homeless and stuff. So we decided to take them all instead of saving the 5 and then do a full restoration. Um, but that's the time when I was able to go on smoothies, a lot of smoothies, and I healed my gut because I was on a liquid diet. So that's where I was going with this, because
no, okay,
I had a 4-month break for digestion because I was on liquid diet. So I pretty much I mean, I still did my intermittent fasting, and I still did my slippery elm tea and stuff, but I wasn't really chewing anything.
yeah,
So it was my digestion was nice and easy. It was just juicing and doing smoothies because of the teeth. So
right.
then at the end of that, I think by the time I had my teeth again and I did another test, everything was normal. I wasn't allergic to anything, and I knew I had healed the leaky gut.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, and that was with Fluids IQ that I had done those tests, and that they're here in Toronto. I think they're in the Toronto area. Fluids
What was
IQ.
IQ for food sensitivity?
They do a zonulin test for food. Well,
Ozone.
they do zonulin for leaky gut, and they do I think 88 different food sensitivities. They
Okay.
also will do I think you can even do a hormone panel with them now, a saliva hormone panel. They're pretty good. So that's how I healed my leaky gut. It's kind of everything kind of happens as it should, and so I know there's probably a 10 ways up the hill. But for me, it just happened that I had all my teeth out at, at that time when I was doing these tests, and I knew that I had to do this without the glutamine. So for me, it was kind of easy. It all kind of happened the way, but not everybody might be able to go on a liquid diet. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but for me, that's what I had to do. So
Right. Well, I have some clients who have gut issues, and that is something I would recommend going on a liquid diet. The only thing is, I wouldn't know what to replace the L-glutamine with. Like, oftentimes, I would recommend some L-glutamine, aloe, and bone broth, and,
that,
so, it's so interesting that one thing led to another, and they kind of each had their benefits. Even, yeah, you just never know.
even having all my teeth taken out, I thought it was going to be awful, but in the end, it actually was part of the protocol that healed my leaky gut. So
Okay, so again, you had mentioned Dr. V when you learned about her and read her book. I guess you read her book, Heal Breast Cancer Naturally,
yeah,
and it mentioned we had talked about the salve, the black salve. Um,
yes.
so can you go into a little bit more detail about that experience?
Okay, so there was a place in Ontario. She's in Hagersville, and she is a minister, but she also does. She's a homeopath, and she does some alternative treatments, and black salve is one of them. She makes it, and she distributes it. It's pretty hush hush and under the table. It's not something that is
Mhm.
advertised. But when I found her, I traveled from Kingston to see her, and I ended up staying because she does the treatment, and then she wants to see you the next day to make sure it's okay. And then you watch it burn off. And then I had come a second time. So the black salve is very painful. I wouldn't suggest. I mean, I know lots of people that have done it themselves. I'm not sure I would have done it myself. I'm not even sure I'd do it again.
Mhm.
Uh, the black salve for me was going bubbly. It's supposed to come off in like an echelon, one big part, and
Okay.
mine wasn't doing that. Mine was bubbling, and it was coming in small little spots. So she'd never seen that before. So we had tried it again, did the same thing. So uh, my numbers went down. My CEA went down right away, in half actually. Uh, so I do think the black salve did something. Like, I'm not
Sorry,
going to say,
what is the CEA? What does that represent?
oh, they're circulating tumor cell. Okay, so CEA is a protein that when you're born, you have it, you have lots of it, but as you grow out of your babyhood, it's non-existent. So most adults will be under 4.7, which is why they say under 4.7 for well, actually, I think most people are under 3 if you don't have cancer.
Okay.
Uh, so if you're under 4.7 when you're doing the marker, that's considered a normal, because people have, even when you're not diagnosed with cancer, have it. But when you're diagnosed with cancer and it rises, that tends to indicate a metastasis.
Okay.
So that's why it's one of the markers that I follow. I also follow CA 15-3, which is specifically a breast tumor marker. There's different markers for different cancers, so those are just the ones that I follow. There's a CA 2729, but a lot of places will do it, but Canada won't do that anymore, not with Life Labs anyway. So I follow a bunch of blood work, well, depending on the month, but I do follow a certain criteria for my the blood chart that I created. I follow that blood work every 4 months. And then twice a year, I'll do something like my estrogen panel and my thyroid panel, just to make sure that, things are good in that area.
So this is really a journey about getting to know yourself. Like,
Exactly it. That's exactly it. And I really believe now that cancer comes to teach us that um, we haven't been living our true self, our
mm,
soul purpose. We haven't connected enough to ourselves to know where our toxicities are, mind, body, or spirit, and that we've gotten too far away from where we're supposed to be. So
so I have a client who she doesn't want to go the conventional route either. She's heard so many bad things about, chemo radiation. She doesn't want to do that. So she says to me, I want to give myself 2 years to, learn about this, to try things. What would you say to somebody like that? Where would you, like, what advice would you have? And how should she start? What are the couple of things that she should start? Because she seems pretty overwhelmed, and it's kind of overwhelming. You have
Very
all of
over.
these possibilities, right? There's the Essiac tea, there's the herbs, there's the coffee enemas, there's ozone, like you were saying, and IV, vitamin C. Like, there's just so many things, so many different paths.
What would I say? The most beneficial thing I think you can do is use your money to test to see where your, I guess, where your toxicities lie, and start there. And the diet is not just about what you consume in your mouth. It's what you consume in your head. It's what you consume on your skin.
Hmm.
So it's all of that. So it's, daily sunshine and daily meditations, or, reconnecting. I know that it sounds woo woo. I get it, because I was military, and like, I would have, if you would have told me 20 years ago, I think I would have rolled my eyes, literally. Um, and today I feel, not only see and know the difference, but I feel the difference when I practice these things. So, and I can see it in my blood work as well. So, I can also feel in the tumor, for the longest time, if there's a lot of stress in my life, it would feel, that's the only time I would ever have pain. And it would be like a sensation of itchiness, and, just this sensation, like it was screaming, the tumor was screaming.
Okay, so
So
that's
for
kind of
me,
like your little marker of stress, of like, okay, back off, you got to do something now. Yeah.
100%. So for me, I chose not to do it because once I found, the research led me to believe that, surgery didn't really extend the length of time. And a lot of women that have surgery come back 5 years later with reoccurrence. I just decided that cancer's hard. You got to pick your heart, right? Um, and my heart involves daily wheatgrass shots, which I consider my chemo, because it's awful. They said you'll get used to it. Well, it's been, I think, 3 years since I've been taking it daily, and it's disgusting. I still can't stand it. But I know it's good for me. And as I do my shots every morning, I give gratitude to being able to even grow it, let alone have it in my possession, because I feel like it's gold. And then I do my juicing according to Hippocrates. So I do a cucumber, and a pack of celery, or a thing of celery, and then microgreens. Microgreens are living, and they're very nutrient dense. In fact, microgreens, adding an ounce of microgreens to your diet every day can increase your white blood cell count, which is
Mhm.
good news for cancer patients.
Yes.
So, I make sure that I eat sprouts and microgreens every day and include them in my daily drinks. So, in fact, I don't even make, like, I don't even make any dressings without putting um, microgreens in them. So I put microgreens in everything. The diet just has to be nutrient dense, whatever that way looks for you. Now, I know I spent the first 3 years on the NORI. I don't know if you've heard of NORI, Nutritional Oncology Research Institute in California.
No, I haven't.
His name is Mark Simon. He's a nutritionist, but he opened it. His wife died of breast cancer, so he started this research institute. So he has a lot of nutrition experts at his disposal, and he does his research. His whole protocol is based on low methionine, no animal proteins, because it's high in methionine. So that's how I started, and my numbers were great. They just weren't where I wanted them to be. The immune system wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be. And I just found out I wasn't getting the results for the amount of money that I was paying every year. I drifted away from that and kind of tweaked it to my own protocol. So that's the only reason that I left there, is because I just felt that for the money. I think it was $3,000 a year, or 5,000, 6,000 for unlimited, but I had done 2 years, and it was on the third year that I decided to stop.
Okay. So for you, that didn't help make any huge progress.
I don't think it hurt.
Hmm.
It helped me change my diet. I mean, I grew up on meat and potatoes, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, now that I know more about how my body deals with things, not really a big meat eater. I don't eat animal proteins in general at this point, but there's a number of reasons for that. I don't necessarily think that that would be good for everyone that's on a cancer journey. I think it would depend on a number of different things. So I'm not advocating for solely vegan, although the Hippocrates, there's a few protocols and clinics that do. Hippocrates is one of them. And I know 2 women who've reversed their breast cancer, clinically reversed with documentation in the last few years by going to that, doing that protocol. And that's wheatgrass and microgreens,
Okay,
stuff like that.
and a purely plant-based diet.
Purely plant-based diet.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. And you had talked about wheatgrass. So many people think of it as a very alkaline drink, wheatgrass juice. And even Tony Robbins had talked about wheatgrass. That's how I got introduced to wheatgrass many years ago because he was like just talking about the most nutrient-dense food, very alkaline. So I would get those little ice packs or even the powder. I'm just curious, did you start consuming wheatgrass to also alkalize your body? Was the alkalinity part of your healing journey? Like, did you even test your urine
Oh
pH?
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yes. I got pretty much got the test strips right away. Well, I had ketogenic strips right away because I had jumped on the keto diet. But
Right.
I once I realized that was just furthering the acidosis that was taking place in my body, I had to really change it. So then I went on some, I think it's called Jensen. It's an alkaline protocol. There's teas and there's porridge. Anyways, so I did those programs for I think 2 months, and then I just really started. The research kept leading me back to the alkaline through plant based.
Okay.
So I really, and I was still doing protein powders, and I was still doing processed food, but I wasn't quite getting the fact that that's processed. So I have since, in the last 3 years, I don't eat processed foods at all, not even protein powders.
That's what
Um,
I was going to ask you that because you had talked about that protein powders containing heavy metals and stuff, and I was wondering what do you take for protein?
I eat a lot of beans. I eat a lot of well, tofu and organic sprouted tofu. But I do eat a lot of beans and lentils and sprouts, and uh, sprouts are incredible for many reasons. They're so nutrient dense,
Mm-hmm.
but and they're easy to grow. So I buy a lot of seeds. People say, "Oh, your grocery bill must be insane," but I buy seeds from mums in Saskatoon, and I grow all my own microgreens. I have a tower in my kitchen. I
Okay.
grow a tray of wheatgrass a day for juicing, and I grow a half a tray of peas, a half a tray of sunflower, and I put that in my juices every day. And then I have everywhere where there's plants in a normal home, I have food growing. So I have radish microgreens and broccoli microgreens and alfalfa microgreens, and they're all over my house. And I just put them on whatever I can put them on. So
That's
um,
great. That's great. Well, broccoli microgreens, broccoli sprouts are really high in sulforaphane. It's great for hormones, detox, supporting the liver. So
100%.
I'm just curious, how did you get to grow the wheatgrass? I know about sprouting. I also have those multi-level plates, but I don't do that much. But the wheatgrass, I'm like, how do you get? Is it from seeds? And then how do
Yeah.
you keep it growing after?
Well, I don't. What you do is you grow it for 14 days, you cut it down, and you throw it away. Now, some people can regrow it. The second grow or the third grow is less nutritious. So, because I'm growing it for medicine, I throw it away after the first cut.
Okay.
And then I just do it all over again. There's an
So it's
expense,
getting the seeds.
the seeds. I buy the seeds by the 5 to 10 kilogram bag, and I use 2 cups of seed every 4 days, and that will grow 4 trays. As I go 4 trays every 4 days, I do a rotation. So um, every 4 days, some of it's coming from seed to light, from to the dark, then from dark to light, then from light to harvest. So I have a couple of different, I have a circular session, and some of them, not all of them are ready at the same time, but I always have the wheatgrass either soaking or in the dark or under the light or being harvested. Like
Wow,
today, we're harvesting wheatgrass. So
that's great. That's great. And where do you get the wheatgrass seeds?
from Mum's
Okay.
sprouted seeds. I get all my sprout, they have free shipping. And I order seeds every month, so I just don't pay for shipping and I get them by the 5 kilogram bag.
Oh, I see. Wow, that's amazing. You really do have to kind of take control of what you consume. You have to own it, right? Like it seems like just growing your own food, sourcing ingredients, just like being your own detective.
It's so true.
Um, good
Taking
for you.
responsibility for your own being. It's yeah. Imagine if everyone done that. We put the doctors out of business.
Well, you look great. How are you feeling today compared to in the beginning of your journey?
Well, I have a twin sister, so I'm really lucky to have a gauge. And she, after 7 years, she's finally this year shaking her head, saying, "You're running circles around me. I have to get on this diet."
You don't
She,
look like your twin anymore.
no, well, we'll be 54 tomorrow, and she said, "I look 10 years older than you do." So, but it's the inflammation. I can see even from 10 years ago. I've always been a fairly slender person, but I had no idea I was so inflamed. Um, and when I look at the pictures, even from 7 years ago, I go, wow, that's incredible. That was just inflammation. So it is pretty profound what somebody can do just through lifestyle changes. And that's what body recognizes. The body doesn't recognize some of these, you know, um, heavily concentrated supplements that we're giving our bodies, like that they're not even natural. They're just so I try to limit the supplements for my liver's sake. I do take curcumin because it hits a couple pathways and it's good on so many levels. So that one is one that I do take. I do take a vitamin D, but I also have a polymorphism that makes it harder for me. I have lower receptors, fewer receptors. So I do take vitamin D. Not everybody will have that issue. So, but I test.
That's my favorite vitamin, actually. I always take vitamin D, considering
I
the fact that we really are always indoors. Even if we're outside most of the time, limited sunlight anyways.
But there's
So,
a lot of, yeah, absolutely. But this spot on the earth, if we're down south, it's different. But you're
mhm.
right, up here in Canada, it's hard to get, the sun that we need. So it's true. But I always, because it's a fat soluble vitamin, I always suggest people test before and then 6 months later. I know a lot of people will just take it and take it and take it, and they never know where they are. Um, and so I don't think that's a good idea. It is not covered. So it will cost, I think, $40 to test. But I think testing is better. Even if you're not going to test at the beginning, test after 6 months so that you know where you are.
And what test is that for
Um,
vitamin
it,
D?
it's just a blood test, and you can go to your doctor and get a requisition for vitamin D. Now
Oh, I
there's,
see. Okay, because
yeah,
you're saying $40, so I'm like, oh, is this like a specialized vitamin D test?
no, but they won't cover it under OHIP unless you can get your doctor to say, like, to approve it. So
Um,
it depends on your doctor. If your doctor approves it, it will be covered. If not, it'll be a $40 charge. So um, it's very funny. If you can get your doctor on board with all of your blood work, it will be, I think, almost free. There's a liver enzyme that they charge $8 for, but I think mostly everything else is covered if your doctor will be on board. Like the CEA is $50. The CA 15-3, those blood markers for breast and for cancer, between the two of them, I think are $90. One's 40 and one's 50. So they are claimable on income tax, but I have two different insurances that won't cover it. So I just claim them on my income tax for
okay.
medical expenses.
Okay, and that's in Ontario. I'm not sure how it isn't here in Quebec, but it's good to know. You had mentioned three things earlier. I didn't really dive into it, but just for people who don't know, so there's ozone therapy, there's vitamin C IV, and then there's the oxygen, the chamber, the oxygen chamber.
Yeah, hyperbaric oxygen
I've
therapy.
actually seen that at a hospital once. I was walking through it and I saw a sign going this way for the hyperbaric oxygen chamber, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So yeah,
Well,
how,
they
how
put
was
well, there was I don't know what it is now, but 7 years ago it was $200 for a session, and it's a 90-minute session, and they put you inside this tube, and they don't submerge the tube, but they pressurize it so it feels like you're being submerged, and your
like
ears
you're in a
pop.
submarine?
Yeah, your ears pop and everything like you're going down. And then you sit there they put on a movie, you pick a movie before you get in the tube, and then at the end of the 90 minutes they come and get you. And um it's like having a coffee without the coffee. You're very awake, you feel very refreshed and very alive. You've just been oxygenated for 90 minutes. So it's a pretty neat experience. Yeah.
Well, how often would you do that?
I did it for 4 weeks, every day for 4 weeks.
Oh,
Five,
every day.
I did 20 sessions. The research shows that stem cells are rejuvenated after 16 to 20 sessions.
Oh,
So um, there's research on it, and the protocols or the studies, I think, got results after 16. So I wanted to do at least 16 treatments in a
right.
row.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was the vitamin C IV.
I did
Oh,
that probably 3 times a week. Mm. And that was for probably, well, six or 8 weeks. And then it got to the point where I really wanted to decide what my going forward would look like, because I knew I couldn't sustain. They were $250 every time I went, so it was like $750 a week for these, and then it was $200 a day for the hyperbaric oxygen. So it became, I think, $14,000 within the first 2 months, and
right.
you know my savings wasn't that much, so I really had to start saying, okay, what do we need to move forward here? And that's when I really started to say, okay, what do I need? And my teeth had to be dealt with, and so we chose to it was a very expensive procedure, but in the end I was 47. I didn't want dentures. I wanted permanent teeth that looked like my own, that functioned like my own, that I couldn't take out and set on a mantle,
Right.
um and so it was definitely was a great solution, but it did take almost all of our savings, um because it was a huge expense. But the teeth is a big thing, right? So
Yes.
um so
Part of
to
the
do it,
digestive system.
I probably would do it again. So yeah. And now if I had to do all the other things, I probably wouldn't have done those. The hyperbaric. Not that I don't think they were good, but do I think that they effectively changed the direction of cancer? No, I don't. So that's what I mean when I say, but I jumped on it because hyperbaric was in the truth about cancer. So of course I had to go out and
Yes.
try that. So and it was expensive, several $1,000s. So I think it was four altogether. So,
Okay.
and that's a huge outlay for a lot of people. I was lucky to be in a position where we could do it, but it ate away at things that I could have done later on. So, and then they told me, I was going to have well, he said you won't be around in 2 years, and
The
so then
doctor.
the doctor. So then, of course, with that in the back of my head, I said, well, what does it matter? So we changed my teeth. We did my teeth, and then we went and traveled to 7 different countries, and
Oh.
uh, we did traveling because I said, if I'm going to be dead, I might as well spend the rest of my saving. And here I am 7 years later, now living paycheck to paycheck because I am.
Oh,
So, so
but
the
your
money,
health is your wealth, right? You have.
that's how I look at it. So the only thing I don't regret it, but I think I wish I would have had a guide to say, you know what, don't spend money on that. Spend money on this, because this is where you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck. And there's so much out there that is so good, but not everybody needs all of it. So, some people might have done better with the hyperbaric oxygen if they didn't have the metals, or if they didn't have, some of the things that I was dealing with. So, and I didn't know I had any of those issues because I just jumped right into a hyperbaric tank without thinking about my own terrain. So, um, anyways, so that's, I think, I wish I'd had a guide to say, okay, so I don't really need that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people who would want a guide. So it'd be great that you're here for those who need some kind of guidance and advice. Yeah, and for you to give them hope. And then lastly, about the ozone treatment, I have seen in different documentaries where people use like a tube, especially depending on where the cancer is. How was it for you? How was it done?
So I got my ozone generator in the States. They're really great people. So because I was having ozone and it was getting expensive. So you know what? I said for the 1,000 or 2 that I'm going to outlay, I'll get more for my bang back. So I got a whole professional set. So even though I can't do dental injections, I even have a dental injection kit. So, but I got the kit for ozone insufflation, which is enema. And you do the enema almost like you would do a coffee enema, only you fill a bag with ozone, just air. And you slowly, it's very, I wouldn't say abrasive. So it can burn if you're real fast. Ozone is very abrasive. So I even have a cup that I put on the breast and put ozone to the breast. I even done vaginal insufflation.
Okay.
So I have a friend who she had ovarian cancer and she would come over and we had gotten her own bag so she could do ozone insufflation, and she's cancer free today. So
Amazing.
now she done a lot of things too,
Right.
and she still drinks dandelion tea every day.
Okay.
But
Fresh
like
dandelion or just the regular dried
just regular dandelion tea. Yeah, I
okay.
think she does fresh when she can, but she's always got dandelion tea going somewhere,
Okay.
and because it kills cancer cells.
Okay.
So fresh is probably always most potent. I mean, but
Because I got a lot of dandelions in my front lawn. That's why I'm asking. I'm like, should I just go and like pluck them all out?
it's so good for us too. And it's so interesting that nature provides them like right in the spring when we need to detox our livers from all the stuff we've had over the
Yeah.
winter. It's just interesting if we listen a little more closely to nature. She has so much good information for us, but we seem to have our blinders off and we say we don't need her anymore. We've got, this other way. And I think that's where cancer is coming to pull us back. And
Yeah, well, that's a great way to look at it as well. And also about the enemas, you were talking about coffee enemas. I have done some of that, not because of an illness, but just because I want to help relieve my liver and, detox the glutathione and all that. And I especially feel like I need to after, let's say, a vacation. Oftentimes we're all irregular, like come back and you're bloated and whatever. So I do that, but I also wonder if there's a downside to it, like to your microbiome. Does it affect it if like you do it often? Do you have to replenish? So it should be you be taking more probiotics, let's say, if you do multiple enemas.
I've often thought about that. I have a colon hydrotherapist that has advised me to do chlorophyll afterwards. So I always do a little bit of chlorophyll or wheatgrass.
Okay. So you
So
just
I
put
even
that into the water, and then after the enema, you put that in and you hold it.
and I just hold it for like, a few minutes and then do the same thing as a coffee enema. I just release it.
Okay.
And then I feel like that gives me back what I'm taking away from coffee enema. A downside to coffee enema or any enema is hemorrhoids.
Hmm.
Let's face it, hemorrhoids is because when we're given the urge to push like that,
True.
sometimes we can stimulate other issues like hemorrhoids. So for me, I was doing at one point, I think three or five a day. Like I was doing an insane amount. That's where the fear takes you. Now I don't think that that's necessary per se, but I was very toxic. And it's funny because people say, why do you think you were so toxic? I was doing tests that were showing my things were off the chart. And I was going, okay, that's from my military experience. Okay, that's from my time on the street. Okay, that's like I could clearly see where I had, been exposed to these things. So, and it wasn't, I think people thought, well, she keeps saying she's toxic. It wasn't out of fear, it was out of knowledge that I knew I had to detox these things to get them out of my system.
Right.
Uh, and then some people I know are really exposed to mold, and I tested for mold and I had no no antibodies, no mold spore, nothing showing mold. So that wasn't my issue. And a lot of times for some clients, that's their main issue. So
Right.
I
So what
really
is the
think,
test for mold? What kind of test?
there's a Micro-Toxins. I talk about it in the class that I spoke of. You can go to Great Plains Laboratory. I think they do oats testing, organics, acids, and some of the testing for that is through mycotoxins for mold and different things. So I think it was Great Plains Laboratory that does that. But yes, there's all kinds of tests for mold nowadays. You can even test for glyphosate exposure,
Yes.
uh,
That's good to
which
know.
I don't even know if we need to test for that. We know we're exposed.
We all have it.
Well, don't waste your money. You know you're exposed to that one. So,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
What about
yeah,
parasites? Have you ever looked into that? And there were some people, I don't remember her name now. She was actually probably one of the people that Chris Work interviewed, and she would run marathons in Maui. I don't know if you remember her. She was in her, I don't know, 60s or 70s. She's running marathons, and she talked about her cancer story. And she said when they opened up the tumor, like she got it out, and then when they opened it, it was sandy. It was like this sandy texture, and she often thought it could be related to parasites. But
I totally believe parasites is a big issue. I believe that wholeheartedly. I do parasite cleansing once a year now. Um, I tested for parasites with the regular stool sample, and it's came out negative. But in my research, I learned that the tests that they do are PCR tests, and they test for the whole DNA. If they don't find the whole DNA or the whole strand, they say it's a negative. So most parasites come out in parts. They
oh,
don't come out as the whole parasite. So you'll always get a negative, even if it's positive. And most parasites won't come out alive, they'll come out dead because their whole existence is to stay inside the body. So the fact that our tests test for them full alive in the stool, you're almost never going to get that. Better tests nowadays that can definitely tell you uh, the bacteria, whether it's fungus, whether there's all kinds of different ones. I think GI map is there's some good ones out
yes.
there. But just because you get a negative from a doctor, I don't think that that's necessarily an accurate stance to go by,
Mhm.
because after I got a negative, I did a parasite cleanse with 20 different anti-parasites, and I did it for a month, and about 2 weeks into it I was starting to take pictures of my stool. I'm telling you, there's something was going on. I was like,
Okay.
well, I don't know what that is, but that looks like rope. And I knew
Mhm.
right away that there was a problem. So, and that was after I had tested negative. So I instead of because I travel and because I eat fruit from other countries that not necessarily from this country, and it's got nothing to do with the country. It's just that these bacteria and parasites travel on
Yeah.
these fruits. So people say, well, I don't travel. You don't have to travel anymore. Your food travels. So
Exactly, exactly.
you know,
And I mean, it's in the ground. If you have a pet, if you have dogs, cats, if you've ever been to a buffet, I actually heard of this story where there were two Jewish people at the hospital that had a parasite in their brain. And it was a kind of parasite that was associated with pork. And they were saying, that's strange. We never eat pork. We never touch pork. And it turns out they both shared the same cleaning lady, and she ate pork, and it was probably through her touching things in the house, and somehow it got contaminated. Yeah, so you just never know.
so I always think it's a good idea. I always say it's not going to hurt. And so
Yes.
it can rebalance. And I mean, my daughter eats sushi on a regular, and I make her do it. I
Yeah.
think
What
you
kind
don't
of
have
test is it? Can you share with us, like, what's the name of that test? I mean, sorry, not test. I meant
Oh, it's called
the blend.
Real Raw Foods sells it. It's called Parapurge.
Real raw foods, and it's called Parapurge.
RealRawFoods.com, yeah, and it's called Parapurge. And they'll also sell a biofilm buster, separately. But if you think you've had parasites for a long time, as you know, parasites kind of get mixed up with this mucus and this. They make a barrier for themselves
Yes, they
where it's hard
hide.
to get to. Right. So sometimes if you've had parasites for a long time and you're not getting results on the Parapurge, it might be because you need to have the mucus to break up that mucus. And so you'll see what I'm talking about. It breaks down that barrier so that the anti-parasites can reach the parasites, because they make it so that the parasites that's why they're parasites. They try to protect at the expense of the host, right?
Okay.
They'll
So
so
once a year is a good, it's good. I think that's
you know what, I think once a year in the world that we live in now, I think that's actually probably not a bad advice to anybody,
I
right?
agree. I've done one last year, but with a different company. It was with Perium, and they have like capsules. It's called I think it's called Clean Dash R, and
Okay.
they have like the wormwood, the black walnut
Yeah.
hull, and clove. So did you feel sick during that time when you took that, the
Well,
antibiotic?
I like to make sure all my pathways are open. Like, I'm sweating, I'm going to the washroom at least twice a day. I mean, I want to make sure my lungs are clear. And I always start on a full moon.
Sure.
We are connected with the moon, whether we want to believe it or not. We're connected with that circadian cycle, and parasites are more active during a full moon. That's well documented,
Yeah.
and you'll get better results if you start. I know it sounds woo-woo, but
Yeah, no,
it's
but they even
actually,
say that that's the eggs hatch on the full moon, right? So you're supposed to repeat it again. You do it one time for a week or two, stop for a week or two, and then repeat it again.
yeah. Well, if you go to the Real Raw Food Pair Purge, is a 30-day treatment, which is why I like it.
Okay.
So it's
Full
nonstop for 30 days. Yeah. And if you think you have a really bad long case of it, then I would suggest the second month that you take it, for the first time, you take it with that buster. And then by the second month, you should be good to do it once a year after that. But I've only ever really seen a client have to do it 2 months in a row, the second time with the buster, and then it gets it. Normally, if you've just got a, fairly new, infestation, I think it's 20 different in the parapurge, 20 different anti-parasitic herbs. So it's a pretty good blend. There's so many good blends out there.
Yes.
I'm not just advocating. This is the one I use because I get all my nuts from them. They have sprouted walnuts, and it's hard to find sprouted nuts on the
Yes.
market, and sprouted sunflower. You can get all that at Real Raw Foods. So I get my fulvic acid from them and everything. So
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna go check it out for sure. Because the company that I work with, Purium, they also have fulvic acid, humic acid, and they have those capsules. But I'm always looking for other options, and especially like for my clients, according to their budget too. So it's really great to know that. I'll definitely
yeah.
check it out. We were just talking about menopause and perimenopause and how and was that something you were going through while you were also healing from cancer?
Well, I was diagnosed at 47, and I was having spotty periods. I mean, they were coming and going. So I know I was starting phases, but I was still having a period. So the oncologist at the time said that, after we did surgery and radiation and chemo and radiation, that we would eventually have to take the ovaries out because they were still producing estrogen. Um, I didn't like that idea either. So I started looking at natural aromatase inhibitors instead of taking tamoxifen and having my ovaries removed. So I went on nettle, and almost I think within the year I had my last period, and then my estrogen levels were tested, and they were remaining extremely low post-menopausal, actually very early on, but it was because I was using herbs to keep them down, keep
Okay,
it
so
down.
you're saying nettle was the main herb that you used to keep it down.
It was.
And was that in a capsule form or was it like tea?
I used just nettle tea. I got it in a silica, a combination with horsetail and oat straw, because silica draws calcium so into the bones. So I wanted to do a combination of those things because I know that when we lower estrogen, calcium becomes an issue,
Mm-hmm.
calcium absorption. So I wanted to really optimize the synergy of the silica herbs. So I took a combination of oat straw, nettle, and horsetail is what I took, and I still take that to this day in my tea. So
I see. So
I
this is
make it.
something you make yourself. You combined it yourself.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah.
That's amazing.
I was going to say, I don't know if you've ever heard of William Lee. He wrote Eat to Beat Disease. And he writes about tamoxifen versus soy. And he did soy and tamoxifen in the lab, and soy beat out tamoxifen.
Beat out some tamoxifen in the sense of changing the estrogen levels,
Yes.
reducing it in the body. Really?
Yeah.
What's the
So
dosage of soy though?
at 1 cup of soy milk a day,
Really? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
just normal. Yeah. So that was something I was also doing, was incorporating soy to my diet every day. So, but that was based on that book, and I should have mentioned that, Eat to Beat Disease.
Me too.
Uh, I met him. He was speaking at one of the Toronto, I had him sign my book. The yearly health conventions that we have for the,
Yes.
so about 4 years ago, he was there speaking, and we were talking about his tamoxifen studies. So it's very interesting stuff that he's actually using food and replacement, like even for apoptosis and for angiogenesis, anti-angiogenesis foods. He says it's better than some of the angiogenesis medicine that they have. So he's got some very interesting work, that guy.
Oh, well, thank you for that tip. So that was your experience. You were saying it took you 1 year, and pretty much that was the last of your periods.
I probably within, I would say, 6 months, I noticed I was not having a period anymore, and then of course the year went by, and so I'm not really sure if what I was doing drove me into menopause, or if it was coincidence. I'll probably never know, but I mean, there's good chances that um, what I was doing had something to do with it. So
Mhm.
that's what I believe, because that's why I chose those herbs. So um, but of course, because I wasn't going to a doctor, they'll never, there's no proof. So
Yes, that's true. But it sounds like it was what was it like a pretty smooth transition? Because there's so many people suffer for years during perimenopause and they have, mental health issues and insomnia and, all kinds of like it's, problems with heavy periods and it sounds horrible for a lot of
yeah,
women anyway.
that does sound horrible. Those sounds like when I was first starting my period at 15, but not the
But
end
they
part.
do say that perimenopause is like puberty, but the second puberty, right? Because your hormones are.
I had a lot of hot flashes in the beginning, but that was before I started um, working with my estrogen. And I did use wild yam cream a lot,
Okay.
um, and to increase the progesterone, because progesterone is very protective, as you know. So
Yes, I have that too. I do that on my arms, like a little.
yeah, I did it on the inside of my underarm. I did it on my forearms. Obviously changed the location, even on my inner thighs, the thinner skin places. I would just change it up. And I probably did that for about 2 years, until I noticed that my hormones were more I'd say regulated, but when you're postmenopausal, I mean, hormones are never regulated, but more of a balanced, where they're not causing an issue.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. You look great. I mean, just looking at you, you look like a really healthy, vibrant, full of joy, full of life human being. And I think that you're here to share a very important message. You serve as a really good example of someone who is doing the work and getting the benefits. It's really that. And I know some people that were very near and dear to me who had cancer, and they were going through the conventional route, and I remember talking to them about these things, like look at your lifestyle, look at the food, look at the toxins, and they wanted to just continue working because that was normal for them. They just wanted to be normal. And I thought to myself, your biggest work is on yourself. It's not on this other job, because you can throw yourself into work. You might not have a lot of time left, but going to work on yourself is a full-time job. So like
It really
I know for me, if this happened to me, I'd quit my job and I'd focus 100% on, getting healthy and learning and, changing.
And the first 2 years, maybe the first three, I probably spent 6 hours a day. I couldn't wait to get my normal life. Maybe not the normal life that I thought I wanted back, but some kind of normalcy, because I couldn't do anything. I was always doing an enema, or on the bathroom floor, or hooked up to an ozone machine, or like I felt like I just wanted to not have to deal with health,
Right.
like so I think there's a happy medium somewhere, but that, the first few years, the fear is overwhelming,
Yes.
because we so inbred, that cancer equals death. Um,
Yes.
and that cancer equals, devastation of life with, losing your hair and the chemotherapy and the vomiting and the sickness. All of that is what you think cancer is, and it's not. That's the treatment. So, and it doesn't have to be like that. So,
Yes, that's a
um,
really important message. And
yeah,
and it's the mental part, it's how you associate with that.
yes.
Where
So
can
when I
you,
see a commercial, sorry,
so go ahead.
when I see a commercial for cancer on TV now, it doesn't frighten me because I remind myself they're not showing cancer, they're showing cancer treatment.
Hmm.
So, because in the beginning, I mean, you're always questioning, am I just crazy? What makes me think I can do this? How come I'm not trusting the doctors? Where do you get off? Like, I mean, I've asked myself all of these questions. Where do you get off telling the doctor he doesn't know what he's talking about when I mean, seriously, you got to ask yourself.
Yes.
Um, I have to remind myself that I have the most invested in my life. It's just his job. Even if he loves his job, it's just his job. It's my life. So,
100%. And during those down days, because I know, a person who's going through this alone, it's not the same as, let's say, if you were going through the conventional route, it's the clear path. This is what you do. But if you're on your own, it's like going into the jungle now, and you're just not sure which way is out. You can get lost. What can you say about the down days when you're ready to give up, and you're just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, or maybe I should just call my doctor.
oh my goodness, I have those days. Even now, sometimes I think, if one thing goes wrong or I see one thing on my, I have to remind myself, okay, that's the fear talking. What did you get in this for? Because fear, the opposite of fear is knowledge. When we know more, I have less fear. So I remind myself, that it's hard either way. And I've picked my heart. And I actually ask myself, do you want to reevaluate that heart? Do you want to go the other way? And then I remind myself all the reasons why I didn't in the first place. Just, I think just telling yourself that, I trust myself. It's a huge challenge to trust ourselves when we've given that trust to someone else our whole lives. And we've been told to trust our doctor for our health, not ourselves. And to listen to my intuition has been one of the hardest, most rewarding things of my life because I finally can say I trust myself immensely. And when my inner voice screams, I listen. And I never used to before. So,
That's very refreshing because we're conditioned a lot of times to question that inner voice and to please others. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I know you also help other people going through this and you coach. So what is the best way for people to connect with you?
well, I have a Facebook, Naturally Nuts with a Z. I also have my Outlook is Naturally Nuts with a Z after nuts at
Okay.
outlook.com.
Naturally Nuts.
Yes, with a Z.
Okay. So that's your
Nuts.
Facebook. And then you said,
Naturally Nuts at outlook.com with a Z on the nuts. Yeah.
okay.
Or on my Facebook page too. Just text me at any time.
Well,
So
thank you. Well, before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or something you didn't mention that you wanted to share?
there's so much we didn't talk about. Like I mean, I really did so many things. It was truly incredible, but I really think I would not wasted a lot. I learned a lot, but my hope is that people take their savings and focus on their future and not waste it on all the other things that we're supposed to think works when really it's about finding out your personal terrain.
Just a quick interruption to say that after the recording, Delina reached out and she wanted to make an emphasis. She wanted to say that understanding your own body's terrain is really important when you're dealing with cancer, and that by checking your toxicity levels, for example, metal toxicity and leaky gut issues, by helping that improve, you can improve your body's immunity, and that would put you in a better position for fighting cancer.
Because you can spend hundreds of dollars every month just on supplements that will get you nowhere. It won't take out the metals. It won't fix your leaky gut. So I think concentrating on healing what we have instead of trying to grab that magic solution. The magic solution is healing the body, right? So
Right. Yeah, well said. Thank you.
Okay.
I think that's very appropriate. I mean, there's no magic pill, right?
I wish there was.
Thank you again for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
If this content interests you and you want to hear more, please subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up and share. Thank you.